So as many are aware, I am no fan of democracy. As a fan of freedom, I can safely say I hate democracy. If you're a true libertarian and you wish to cultivate an environment where such an ideology could thrive, a monarchy is a much better suited vehicle for such an endeavor. And for those of you that think that is an absurdly antiquated idea, may I remind you that it was the left who called Trump a fascist, but it was the right who memed him an emperor. But a while ago, I was in a conversation about one of the issues plaguing America's red states, as many blue states continue to double down and violently shoot themselves in the arsehole over and over again with regards to coof policies. A scourge of lefties have decided to leave their piss-poor managed states and head for greener pastures, or in this case redder ones, and as a result, the red states are receiving little hordes of blue-pilled idiots who carry along with them the blue mind virus. If you're a conservative wishing to conserve your state away from said mind virus, you might wish to enact some sort of measure, some mitigation to prevent your healthy and wealthy red state from turning into a shot-to-pieces blue hellhole, a process I will amusingly call Californication. As Mark Calloway, otherwise known as The Undertaker, said of Californians coming to Texas, bring the money, leave the values. Wise words. My suggestion, as a procedure of mitigation, was a break-in period and prohibiting voting in state and local elections for a period of time, say 5 years. Matter of fact, it was brought to my attention, actually just before I made this video, that recently booted off of Twitter Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene a few days ago curiously also suggested the very same thing. During my conversation, however, this predictably received some backlash from the Americans, seeing as they cling to voting much like any red state does to their guns or genitals. A question was levied: do they still have to pay tax? My answer was yes, seeing as you're still availing yourself of state services. But the question does raise a curious assertion that your capacity to be taxed is dependent on your ability to participate in the electoral process. Interesting. If you ask Americans what was the underlying cause of the American Revolution, their battle with the British Crown, some will undoubtedly say no taxation without representation. This phrase has come to mean representation elected by the people. However, if one were to examine that phrase at face value, there's nothing explicitly in that phrase that says representation needs to be democratically chosen by the populace, merely that the representation exists. The phrase no taxation without representation has nothing to do with the democratic procedure or the republic, so this can be applied to any form of government. So with that in mind, depending on the interpretation and its application, one can ponder some interesting scenarios with who and how it's applied to. For example, foreigners. If they work in the US, they don't have the ability to cast a ballot, they can't participate in the democratic process, and yet they're still expected to pay tax. Why? If one has an issue with the previous example of no taxation without representation, no foreigner ever working in the US would ever pay a cent to Uncle Sam. Imagine if you did that in the US now. Businesses would love foreign workers. In theory, and I'm sort of speculating here, if they didn't pay any taxes, they could pay the workers a lower wage, and the workers would still have more money because they don't pay any tax on their earnings. Even if the wages were locked thanks to some bogus BS like the minimum wage, the locals would all end up hating the foreigners either way, seeing as they ultimately still get more money. Which also presents us with a lasting, pondering question. How many people do you think would give up their voting ability if they never had to pay any tax? Then that's all for today. Until next time.